Welcome to another episode of the Voices for Voices TV show and podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I am founder and executive director of Voices for Voices and your host, Justin Allen Hayes. Thank you for all your support. We're reaching 50 countries, 550 cities here in the States and abroad, and we couldn't do this without your support. So if you could give us a big thumbs up, if you could subscribe, we could really appreciate that. And we're gonna get started with our guest for today. Very grateful to have been part of a once-in-a-lifetime performance for my good friend Kutztown Chin with Hearts for Music. Came to Kutztown University here in Pennsylvania, and were embedded within the orchestra. And it was just incredible to be part of that. And so what we thought we would do is, we were able to get on his schedule kind of last minute, is to have a chat with the Orchestra Director, Dr. Isaacson, talk about his passion, how he got started with his profession, and all the way into how it's impacting and making a difference in lives, whether we can see it or like some with Hearts for Music, or if they have an internal challenge that's going on. So Dr. Isaacson, thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. It really was a wonderful concert last night, and a first of its kind, and hopefully there'll be more.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity. I know it's a big, something new, and to be able to coordinate on many different levels.
Yeah. I mean, it's really extraordinary, I think, what Kutztown has brought forward, because through technology and the tablets, and so he's really made music more accessible to so many more individuals that otherwise would be left out of the picture. And I think it's a really exciting time for the development of music, and I think in educational aspects, and just the sheer joy of collaboration, which touches all of our lives and enriches us in many ways. I think when you ask me about inspiration and about music in general, I think one of the easiest ways to answer that question for me is really through the lens of non-music majors and people who aren't really around music in the way that I am or you are, or Kutztown is, and the musicians we worked with last night. And I was thinking, and I come at this because occasionally I teach a class it's a general music class. Okay. And so it's to the general population, and there are many students in there that have never had any experience even playing music. But of course, it's a part of their lives in ways they don't even realize. So I always tell them, music is really like an amplifier for the human experience in many ways. Then we start a discussion, and I start pointing out, well, where do you hear music? And then we start listing the places that happens: in the grocery store, and in Golden Bear Stadium, in movies, and ceremonies. What would a wedding be without music? So I mean, it's all pervasive in our entire culture, and it serves so many different needs and elevates the experience. And occasionally what I'll do, I know this sounds kind of, stilted, but I'll go and I'll play a little video clip of William and Kate's wedding in London.
Yes.
But what I'll do, and it's at Westminster Abbey, and it's incredibly beautiful, and there's so much pageantry. Everyone's dressed to the nines, and they even brought trees into the sanctuary. I mean, it's ridiculous. And there's a full orchestra and men and boys choir in there. But what I do is I play the opening when Kate is lining up with a long trail and the dress, and she's standing there with her father, and the organ introduction comes into Perry's "I Was Glad," but I play with no sound. And so you see people just walking in, and it's like something's really missing. So then we go back, and I put the sound on, and that organ just comes in and fills the space, and it changes everything. So the music and the sound changes everything in our lives. It is therapeutic. It can be relaxing. It can be challenging, and so it fosters all kinds of, I think, growth for us as humans, really.
It does, and I have mental challenges myself, and music is very therapeutic. And I think while there's an aspect of getting close to perfection in a performance,
Yeah.
but really we're just looking at ourselves and how we say, oh, how good are we compared to this person or this artist? And at the end of the day, it's really we're just individuals and playing. So whether it's the most complex piece or whether it's the most basic, I've found that it's very therapeutic. And one of the reasons to come 5 hours and to be a part of it, not just for Kutztown, the university, and be able to speak with you, but then I'm also doing it for myself and my therapy. And my therapist, we talk about that often, about finding ways to lower stress. And while learning music, it could be considered quite difficult at the beginning, learning all the notes. It's just incredible when you bring people from all walks of life together, and they're just playing the best they can, and to bring that together. So as an orchestra director, how do you manage that with the different instruments and?
Yeah, I can talk about that in a general way, and then I can kind of, if you want, zero in on how it worked for integrating with Hearts for Music, because I think that would be interesting to everyone.
Yes.
So, in a general way, directing orchestra is kind of like being a coach in some ways, in many ways. So, the students and the situations that I've been a part of, the people that come to play an orchestra usually come with quite a bit of experience and training in order to do that. And essentially what I do is I like to say in my conducting classes, I'm a facilitator. Hopefully I'm a facilitator, not someone who's creating problems. So, what I do is I show time, I show rhythm, I coach musical nuance and phrasing, dynamics, loud and soft, and then I try to fix problems, because anytime you have 50, 60, 70 people, whatever it is on stage, there's going to be issues. Doesn't matter how good you are at what the training is. And so I think the conductor's role is to bring all of that together in a cohesive message where it's together and the intent of the composer and the music is really clear. That message gets across to the footlights. And so there's a whole process for that, and I think part of what's engaging is that that process is a growth process for me too. Because I feel like I have kind of, along the way, transformed how I do things, and I've learned from them. So there's a reciprocal nature back and forth that's really, I think, engaging, and that's why it never gets tiring. Because there's always new problems, there's always a different piece, a new piece. And for me, particularly in education, every 4 years I've got students cycling out. So I've got a new batch coming in that I've got to train and work with and get them to grow, because they're going to be the next music educators or go on to grad school and pursue performing, whatever it is they may be doing. That onus is on me to get them ready in that sense. So, and I think that's one of the great things about it. With Hearts for Music, when we go down that same road of preparation, they've already been rehearsing, so they know the music. But what they're adjusting to, I think, is how we keep the orchestra together in time versus what Kutztown was doing on the keyboard.
Yes.
Because he is so inspirational and full of so much energy, and he has a certain way of directing. However, with his hands full, he's got both hands going because he's playing the melody in the right hand and some of the harmony in here in the left hand. So his hands are tied down, so he doesn't have the ability to project in real time necessarily what the tempo is or what the broader ensemble needs to start and or finish. Because you can only direct so much by gesture, head, and all of that. And when you have all those people on stage in the distance, that's where I come in, because I have to interpret what he was doing at the keyboard and kind of convey that in real time to the players behind and around to the side. Yeah. So, and in relation to how it fits with the orchestra, there are instruments that transpose. So there are some instruments that play at concert pitch, and there are French horns that are in the key of F. You have trumpets and clarinets that are in the key of B flat. So we actually had to get some parts together so that they had at least some loose guidelines about, you know, what notes to play, because where the technology interacts with those people that are in the front in that first circle, they're essentially, as I understand it, touching the tablet, and that outlines a G chord or a C chord or A flat, whatever it may be. And so that's in real time at concert pitch. They can do that, but the instruments themselves have to know that what key it's in. And so we had a little bit of a touch and go in one moment, because he was going to play Amazing Grace, I think, in G, and it was actually in F, but we got that worked out. And that's part of what the rehearsal was. That's why we put it together in that way. And then it's mixed through the sound system in the auditorium. And he's been ingenious, I think, about how to make that system compact and user-friendly. For me, it was so inspiring to look around as I was directing, because I saw all of these individuals with different mediums in front of them. Some had tablets, some had real instruments, and they were all playing together and experiencing the joy of making music together. And that's the one thing too that I didn't mention as a director, is that collaborative element is really edifying in the end.
Yeah, it's really, as Cottrell mentioned at the beginning, if you close your eyes and just listen, and you can't tell if a person has a disability or not. It's the show The Voice, it's similar in a little bit of ways of, okay, we're not facing, we can't see the individuals, we're gonna hopefully that they're legit and they're actually doing it, and it's not coached, and that where they're turning around based off of the sound, and to be able to have an audience at a performance like last night, a concert, I think that's always a real interesting way to look at things, and I think it ties to your wedding example, where you had the volume turned all the way down and you watch it, and then the volume's up. It's like, okay, yeah, this makes sense.
It does, yeah.
And then I think it's a little bit like turning the chair when everybody closes their eyes, they listen to a part of a song or a whole song, and then they open their eyes and they actually see visually who is who's playing that. And I think that part is it's just so neat because I'm always a learner too as well, and to look at things in a new perspective, I think that's helpful to the general population who may not have the experience and that you have, and Cottrell and the orchestra, both orchestra members, that everybody's coming with their unique sets of abilities, and you're bringing it all together. So when you practice, do you practice as a full orchestra, or do you sometimes break it up, or does somebody help with that? How does that work?
So we generally practice as a full orchestra 2 times a week, but the students themselves do have sectionals occasionally when they can fit it in, because we're in the schedule. We're kind of underserved, I think, in the rehearsal time for what we do, because we give 4 concerts a year, different full repertoire, plus a holiday concert we collaborate with, and we have a concerto competition. So it's a busy structure for the university orchestra in this type of setting, and so every rehearsal, I feel like we're under the gun. Like, this concert's over and already we got a new set of repertoire, plus we're playing for graduation this year, so I've got to get that music in, and Gershwin was a rental, so I got to send that out, and I've got it, and so the week after next we start again, and we've got to learn all that stuff before the end of the year. So because of that, I have to be efficient, so the most efficient way to do that is have everyone at once doing it. And then, I would say it's a little bit like if you and I were having to build something, or say like create a sculpture out of a block of stone. Those first initial cuts are kind of broad, and then what happens is you refine it over time, until it is what it is for the concert. So because obviously if they're sight reading, they're just looking at pieces for the first time, it's not going to sound performance ready. So we go through that process every time, and we get better at it, we get quicker at it, and we come with more experience as we go and throughout the year, and so that's part of the exciting part. And I think one of the things I want to circle back on is what you were saying about the concert last night and people closing their eyes and then opening them, like what Cottrell says in the performance, and then realizing who's on stage. That's, I want to say, a wall in our society that is eroding. And it's been particularly moving for me because my son is autistic. So for me, I come at this with some experience. And so when you have a family member who is neurodiverse, and that person has to fit into the mold of society, your eyes are open to a lot of things that they were not otherwise open to. And I feel like that concert last night shows that in a really big light, because people come up there and they see what's happening. They not only realize what's possible, but I think in the back of their minds, they realize that perhaps they were carrying on and holding on to some expectations and some viewpoints that maybe they can let go as a result of that. So I also feel very strongly about that, because we have to intersect with all people, and all people speak the language of music. It doesn't matter what it is. We're hardwired for that, and that's why music is also so powerful. It cuts across every divide in society you can put down, and it cuts right like a hot knife through butter. It doesn't matter, and that's one of the things that I love about it too. And I guess that's why music has been a lifelong pursuit for me, in that way.
Yeah, and Cottrell also mentioned he's a native from Singapore, and he was back visiting, and he was at a assisted living facility, and he's trying to teach them how to work the tablet, and there was just the whole understanding in a different language and what's going on, and not really relating to it because the culture and norms in Singapore are different, very different.
Of course.
And when, as Cottrell mentioned, once he played the Star Spangled Banner, that like perked up. And so whether they heard it on the Olympics sometime, somewhere, some way, that resonated with them. And I think that's a perfect example of that, and being able to cut across whatever belief somebody has. It's like, okay, I recognize this. Now whether they like it or not, that's a different topic.
Yeah.
But the fact that they can recognize that is just, I think, just shows how we're just connected as humans, whether you're a human in Singapore or Brazil or here in Pennsylvania, in Kutztown. And it's just amazing to hear those stories, and it inspires me and helps me feel what I do with Voices for Voices, and at times when I can with Cottrell's group, is just be able to take part and be a participant, that I don't always have to be a leader, I don't always have to be a host, or doing this speaking engagement or doing that, and just to be immersed and just be another one of the 70, 80, whatever that number is, was just very cathartic and very just eye-opening. And so I'd say I'm a little bit selfish. I did it a lot for me last night, as well as, and I told Cottrell, I'm like, I got the major depression, I got the general anxiety, I got the bipolar, and low spectrum autism. And the crazy part about that for me with the lights and the sounds is being at the concert and the lights and the sound.
And you were comfortable
and I was
anyway.
comfortable.
Yeah, isn't that incredible?
And I think it's that focus that I'm able to, at that very moment, just be focused in what I'm doing. Kind of like a surgeon when they go into surgery, that they have certain, depending on the surgery, they have certain protocols that they go through. I think that you want them to be focused, and you don't want their mind to kind of be wandering. And my therapist has mentioned to me that that's one of the superpowers, is to be able to, at times, being all over the place and thinking about this and doing that. But when it comes down to it, if there's something we're working on, like right now, like I'm just focused in on the conversation. I don't know what else is going on. I mean, the world's kind of doing its thing, but being right here in the moment, I think, is another piece to understand. And to your point about having a family member with autism, to society, I think, no matter what, if they haven't experienced it themselves, they're not gonna understand as much. And it's not a negative to say like, oh, well, you're wrong, we're right. It's just more, okay, these are the experiences that I have, and you have these experiences, and let's come together, as opposed to trying to put people in kind of silos and say, okay, well, you can't do this, so we're going to put you over here. Where it's like last night, it's like the inspiration. So of the 300 that were in the auditorium, there's probably at least one person that was inspired, and if they weren't inspired themselves, they were inspired to talk to a family member, a loved one, a spouse. And I think that's the big takeaway of how we talk about, we want to help people across all divides, and that's very, very helpful, because we don't know. We know in the moment what actually happened. Like, okay, this piece was played, and here's what it sounded like. Here's what it looks like. The musicians. But at the end of the day, we really trying to think of
there's a bonding process.
Yeah, there's a bonding, and 5 years, 10 years, a month down the road, a student may go on to do XYZ activity and inspire, and by one little, I'm saying little, big concert, but a little thing years ago or months ago, they're bringing that into their practice. And I think, I'm sure you get feedback from past students on what they're doing and how you impacted what they're doing. And I think that obviously there's the job aspect with the money and the paying the bills and that, but when it comes down to it, if you take all of that out, you want to make a positive impact, and you want to help people, like you said, coach them like a sport. The baseball, you got the spring training, and people are rusty, and they might not get a lot of playing time. But then at the end of the year, before the playoffs start, and then through the playoffs, that's where you want to be peaking. And I think with the concerts, that's where you want.
Yeah, they're mile markers for sure. Yeah. They're mile markers for sure. And I think, touching on what you said about the job or compensation or all of that, yes, we need that, and yes, music is a profession, it's a career on many different levels. It doesn't matter what type of thing. If you're in education, generally you're also doing performing other things on the outside, like many of our professors do here. We all have other things that come into that mix, but I think there is a vocation that comes with the arts and music that is beyond just a profession, because of that bonding human element. I mean, I feel like I'm connected to Hearts for Music and those people on stage, including you, because of that experience that we had last night. It brought us all closer together because we were depending on one another and working towards something to try to present something beautiful to the audience that was so receptive. And I think that process is really unique and really special, you know, to what we do in real time in music. It really is. So I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'm grateful to actually sit down and talk to you about it, because up until this morning, it was there was so much chaos getting there, because there were just a lot of things that had to get worked out in the last 2 days. So it was all about the next thing. Instead of finally we're on stage, it happens, and we can experience it, and now there's a moment to reflect on, well, what was the impact of that? What did it do for people? What did it do for me personally? And how did it reach our audience. I feel like that's one of the things that I also teach a conducting class here. Delves into all kinds of minutiae about that and what we do. Even though I am a trained violinist, that's sort of where my job has brought me, as a duality. And one of the things, we just had a midterm test, and one of the things that was on there had a lot to, there's a question in the score straight element, what reaction do you want the audience to have? And that's an interesting question as a performer, because we usually are so focused on what is exactly happening in real time, what our own expectations are. We forget about what do we want to give to the audience, or how do we want them to react to what we're doing. And that's another way that door can swing open, and you can think about what you're doing and gives you perspective.
Yeah, and they can put themselves in their own shoes when they attended concerts and shows and the like, and say, what was I hoping to get? Was I just hoping to just hear some music, to support a friend, a family member, but to really put that in the perspective of, yeah, what is that impact? And I think, I know for me, going through undergrad and then graduate school, it was always the next thing, the next thing, the next goal, the next goal, next goal. And I kind of got to a point where my next thing and next things got to be a little bit smaller. So a degree versus, oh, I'm working on this project, or whatever I'm doing, and I'm not feeling validated in the same way that I was. And to really look at things at that holistic level of, what am I doing here on earth? There's a reason why we're here. We may understand a little bit or a little sliver, but we really don't know. Why am I here? Why are you here? Why is Control? Why are we on earth, and how were we brought together? And I think that once I started looking at those things from the outside, kind of like that midterm question, I started to go, okay, what do I want to do, not just for the paycheck, but for emotional as well, to help out. And that's why getting in a car and driving 5 hours, it was what it was. But I can't, that experience was just incredible to be a part. And I Control was like, thank you. I said, no, thank you. Like, you allowed me the opportunity. Like, you're doing for me what you're doing for other orchestra members and in the audience. And it's really just a beautiful thing that when you bring those together, all walks of life, that, yes, your students, a year ago, did you think that you would be on stage with the
That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. It's and this all came about through human relationships. Well, there's a student in the KU Orchestra who has been volunteering for Hearts for Music. She's a freshman. Her name is Paige Haight, and she's the one that kind of made this connection. Okay. Otherwise, without that human connection, I wouldn't have necessarily pursued this, because I didn't know. Yeah, and so I find that always really interesting, because those connections run deep, and yes can be a very powerful word. I think being open to things that are out of the norm really can be really gifts, actually, and you might not realize it until you're going through the process, because it's very easy to get into patterns of what we do, patterns of disconnecting, like what you were saying about grad school, the general expectations that we have for our careers or our education, all those things. And I think what you hit upon is exactly, I think, what you come to in maturity is, what do I want to impart? How do I want to affect people and help and the future? What is my broader mission of good? Because I think that's something that we all reflect on in our own mortality as we go forward. What do I want to leave here? What do I want to help with? And so I think I'm grateful to music, because that gives me a built-in mission, and it gives me a built-in platform. Because if I were not an orchestra director, last night would not have happened in my life. And you know, I'll tell you, in my younger years, I sometimes resented it.
Oh, I would
Because I you know, I got 3 degrees in violin, and I started out as a violin teacher and professor and playing a lot, and then suddenly, a previous job, the orchestra became what I was doing too, and so, but as I get older, I realize that it's also been an extraordinary gift. It's a burden, but also an extraordinary gift. So.
We're at the end of this particular episode.
Yeah.
Do you mind sticking around to continue the conversation so we can continue that awareness?
Yeah,
Great.
of course.
Well, thank you, our listeners, our viewers, wherever you're at. If you can give us a big thumbs up, we would really appreciate it. Subscribe. And we want to thank Dr. Isaacson here, the Kutztown Orchestra Director, for joining us on this episode.